After I made another kid at the group home cry, the director, Mrs. Gable, sighed and LED me to a young couple. If you're looking for a companion for your nonverbal son, she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion, this one's your best bet. She's the most spirited child in the entire facility. She leaned in and whispered, my only request is that once you take her, you don't bring her back. Please. The young couple didn't seem to hear that last part. Their eyes lit up. She's exactly what we're looking for. I didn't know what nonverbal meant, but my new mom explained it to me on the car ride home. It just means you can talk to him as much as you want, she said with a warm smile. And he'll never, ever tell you to be quiet. My own eyes lit up. He sounded like the perfect friend for me. My new parents, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, LED me to a closed bedroom door, their faces filled with nervous hope. Go on in, sweetheart, my new mom said softly. Your new brother, Leo, just doesn't like to talk. He's very sweet. Once you get to know him, if you can get him to say even one word to you, my new dad added, we'll give you anything you want. My eyes widened. I pushed the door open. Hey, LA slam. I stared at the closed door completely baffled. My parents sighed from behind me. It's okay, Luna, my mom said, her voice laced with a familiar disappointment. I'd heard a million times. He's just like this. Why don't you try again tomorrow? Your room is just down the hall. They walked away, their shoulders slumped. I had to fix this. It was obviously just a matter of finding the right approach. I tried again. He, Leo, slam. Okay, a different tactic. My dearest brother, slam. Oh, brother. My brother, handsome and strong, slam. Forget it. That door was welded shut for the day. The next morning, I came downstairs with a screwdriver. My parents, standing at the top of the stairs, just gave me a subtle, encouraging nod. I wedged the screwdriver in, gave it a twist, and the doorknob came off. Braced myself, gave a mighty heave, and the entire door popped off its hinges. He was just sitting there, sitting on the bed, staring blankly into the void. Hi, Leo. I'm Luna. I'm your new sister. Crash. He threw the book he was holding against a bookshelf, his only sign of protest against my invasion. I just grinned at him, then dove straight into his bed, burrowing under the covers. My parents exchanged a look and quietly slipped away. I reached for his hand. He pulled it back. I reached again. He dodged. We played this game for a solid 5 minutes. Finally, I gave up on physical contact and went back to what I do best. I snatched the stuffed alligator. He was clutching and hugged it to my chest. Okay, Leo, listen up. Back at the home, I used to tell stories to my stuffed animals every morning. So now I'm going to tell you one. He didn't say a word. His gaze fixed on a loose thread on his comforter. Honestly, this was already an improvement. At least he wasn't calling me a freak or trying to kick me out. I beamed at him. I'm going to tell you about my life. The group home was actually pretty interesting. For my 3rd birthday, the director found me with a broken arm. She said if she hadn't, I'd have grown up to be a disabled chatterbox, instead of just a regular one. Pretty lucky, right? Anyway, all the kids there were drama queens. There was this one older boy who made all us little kids pretend he was an emperor. We had to bow and tie his shoes and clean his corner of the room. I told him my arm was broken, and I couldn't, and you know what he said? He said, even the crippled had to serve the emperor. So I accidentally spilled a bucket of dirty mop water all over him, and told him he wasn't a real emperor. He was just a big baby with no friends. Leo's fingers twitched. I saw his eyes flick toward me. For a split second, I was on a roll. Mrs. Gable saw the whole thing and heard me cuss him out, so she made me clean all the bathrooms as punishment. So I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and took a nap. See, I'm pretty smart, huh? I giggled and reached for his hand again. He immediately snatched it away. So we started our little game again, me reaching him, dodging, until he got so fed up he threw off the covers, jumped out of bed, and ran for the living room. I scrambled after him, my hand outstretched. Wait, Leo. I'm not done with the story. My parents looked up from the sofa as we stormed past. Honey, look. Dad whispered. Our son seems much more energetic. My parents decided that getting Leo to leave his room made me a certified genius. They rewarded me by buying me a mountain of gifts. I immediately hauled all of it into Leo's now doorless bedroom. Don't be jealous, I announced. What's mine is yours. I'm very generous. I started unpacking sparkly hair clips. Mine pink dress. Mine patent leather shoes. Mine. All mine. I looked at the sea of pink gifts and then at Leo. A thought occurred to me. Hey, maybe you like pink. I grabbed his hand before he could react, successfully capturing it, and shoved a small pink purse into his palm. Here, this one's for you. He recoiled as if he'd been burned, dropping the purse and frantically wiping his hand on his shirt. I looked at my own palm, then back at him. Your hands are really soft. You know that he started wiping his hand even harder. My parents, thinking I didn't like the gifts, decided to take me to the mall to pick out my own things. Is Leo coming? I asked, glancing toward his room. They both got that sad look on their faces again. Leo doesn't like the mall, honey. Who doesn't like shopping? I said. Maybe you just haven't tried. He doesn't like crowds. My mom interrupted gently. It makes him feel scared and unsafe. He can lose control. They took my hands to lead me outside. As we walked, I glanced back and saw him standing on the second-floor balcony, his expression as blank as ever, watching us leave. He probably wanted to be a normal kid just like everyone else. I stopped and let go of their hands. I'm not going, I announced. I'm gonna stay here with Leo. I'll love whatever you bring back. Before they could protest, I sprinted back up the stairs. I knew he was waiting for me behind me. I heard my parents start to cry. She's an angel. A literal angel. I burst through the empty doorway and grabbed Leo's hand. I'm staying. I'll tell you more stories. To my complete shock, he didn't pull away this time. He just let me lead him over to the sofa. My eyes lit up. I had a captive audience. Okay, Leo. Have you ever heard the story of the little match girl? Well, this is the story of the little grenade girl. Leo just stared at me. Once upon a time, there was a poor little girl who had a whole house full of grenades. He went out on the street to sell them, but no one wanted any. She was so cold and hungry, and she missed her grandma. So she pulled the pin on a grenade to keep warm. And that night the whole village got to see her grandma too. Leo blinked. The game. It's kept coming. My room was overflowing. I was starting to feel guilty, because I still hadn't gotten their son to say a single word to me. One day, my parents sat me down. We've enrolled you in school, Luna. We adopted you. And that means we have a responsibility to make sure you get a proper education. I looked toward Leo's room. Can I go to school with him? They shook their heads. Leo is older than you, sweetie. Even if he went, you wouldn't be in the same classes. A private tutor is better for him, but maybe you should try spending time with peers his own age. I argued. I saw online that it can be helpful. They looked at each other, and after a moment of silent debate, they nodded, okay, we can try. I shot up and ran to Leo's room. Guess what? Now we can have matching backpacks. Leo just kept reading his book. I was right. Going to school definitely produced an emotional reaction in Leo. Pure terror. His face was pale. His palms were sweating, and a vein was throbbing in his forehead. He looked like he was about to shatter. I immediately grabbed his hand. It's okay, Leo. He didn't pull away. Instead, he squeezed my hand so tightly, I thought my bones would crack. I winced but held on. Then came the whispers from the other students. Why is that psycho back? People with brain damage shouldn't be allowed in normal schools. Look at the way he walks. Total weirdo. The mute got himself a little babysitter. How cute. And in that moment, I understood everything. I spun around, my teeth bared. Say one more word, and I will punch you in the face. Pointed at each one of them. Leave him alone. They scattered like cockroaches. The mutt's got a psycho bodyguard now. Let's go. I rushed back to Leo, who was staring at the floor. I took his hand. Don't listen to them. They're the psychos. From now on, I'm here. No one will ever mess with you again. I pulled out a pair of matching GPS tracker watches. Our parents had bought us, and snapped one onto his delicate wrist. I the other on my own. If anyone ever gives you trouble, you press this button, I said, pointing to the call function. I'll find you, I promise. He didn't say anything, but he kept staring down at the watch on his wrist. My little speech at the front gate had worked. No one bothered us in class, but during the last period of the day, my watch vibrated. I answered it, and all I could hear were muffled shouts. What's the matter, freak? Your little girlfriend isn't here to save you now, is she? Get out of our school. I didn't even ask for permission. I just ran. I found him on the playground surrounded by a group of older boys. They were kicking and shoving him, but Leo wasn't fighting back. He was just standing there, his right arm wrapped protectively around the watch on his left wrist. I went feral. I launched myself into the group, tackling two of them to the ground. You want to fight someone? Fight me, you cowards. The leader of the group sneered. You really think you can take all of us? Before I could answer, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Leo. He was gently shaking his head. I saw then that he already had a bruise forming on his cheek. It's okay, Leo. I whispered. Don't forget. I was the toughest kid at the group home. I can handle these guys. I dropped my backpack, unzipped it, and pulled out a broken hockey stick I'd found. One of the boys gasped, holy crap. She's actually insane. By the time our parents arrived, Leo and I were sitting alone in the principal's office. I smiled and picked a piece of grass out of his hair. You even look good with grass in your hair. He turned his face away. What happened? Our parents demanded as they rushed in. I knew I was in for it. Now. They were probably going to send me back. I nervously squeaked. He squeezed Leo's hand. He didn't let go. He squeezed back. This girl, the principal said sternly, took a weapon and sent 6 of our students to the nurse's office. Their parents are demanding a full expulsion. Just as I was about to make my case, my parents knelt down in front of me. Luna, don't be scared. My mom said, just tell us the truth. We'll handle it. I stared at them. I wasn't going to be yelled at or sent away. I held up my watch and played the recording of the call. They started it. I said, we're hurting Leo. I wasn't fighting people. I was fighting monsters. As the recording played, the taunts, the slurs, the sound of punches, the faces of the school administrators went pale. My parents were shaking with rage. This is your idea of a safe learning environment, my dad said, his voice dangerously low. I think the Blackwood Foundation may need to reconsider its donation for the new library. That night, I was back in my usual spot, burrowed under Leo's covers, my cold feet resting on his for warmth. He didn't pull away. You're a hero. You know that. I told him. Mom and Dad got those kids expelled and their parents got in trouble, too. Serves them right. You're so warm, Leo. I'm used. I was always cold at the group home. See, we're a perfect match. I looked at his silent face and my heart ached for him. You know, I said softly, your classes get out before mine. Could you maybe wait for me after school? You could read in the car until I'm done. He didn't say anything. Silence means yes. I chirp. He still didn't say anything. The next day when my classes ended, I saw the familiar black SUV waiting by the curb, and my heart did a little flip. He had listened. Look. Before I could finish his name, a hand clamped over my mouth, and the world went dark. The darkness smelled like cheap cologne, stale tobacco, and decaying leather. My struggling was purely instinctual. Before my brain could even process that I was being dragged backward into the gaping side door of a rusted panel van, the survival tactics from the group home kicked in. I sank my teeth into the fleshy part of the hand suffocating me. A man cursed sharply, his grip loosening just enough for me to rip my head away. Little rat bit me. Just get her in and shut the door, another voice hissed from the driver's seat. I kicked out wildly, my patent leather shoes connecting with a kneecap. The man grunted, but his other arm was already wrapped around my waist, lifting me off the asphalt. The heavy metal door slammed shut, cutting off the afternoon sun, the school, and the sight of the black SUV idling 50 yards away. I was thrown onto the ribbed metal floor of the van. The impact drove the air from my lungs. Before I could scramble up, a heavy boot pressed into my spine, pinning me down. Zip ties bit mercilessly into my wrists as they were wrenched behind my back. Keep her quiet, the driver growled, hitting the gas. The van lurched forward, tires squealing. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but I forced my breathing to slow. Panic was a luxury kids at the group home couldn't afford. I pressed my cheek against the cold, vibrating floor of the van and let my eyes adjust to the gloom. There were 2 of them. The one holding me down was a thick-necked man with a receding hairline. He was panting, nursing his bleeding hand. The driver was thinner, his eyes darting nervously in the rearview mirror. You think the Blackwoods will actually pay? The thick-necked man asked, his voice shaking slightly. They ruined my life, Dave. The driver snarled. Got my kid expelled, got me fired from the firm because old man Blackwood pulled his accounts. They owe me. They're gonna pay a couple million to get their shiny new charity case back, and then we disappear. I recognized the driver's face from the reflection in the mirror. It was the father of the bully I'd battered with a hockey stick. Idiots, I thought. Absolute amateurs. I wriggled my fingers behind my back. My right hand brushed against my left wrist. The chunky plastic of the GPS watch was still there. They hadn't bothered to search me. They just saw a little girl. They didn't know I was the Grenade girl. Slowly, agonizingly, I contorted my wrist. My thumb found the grooved surface of the call button. I pressed it and held it down. Please, Leo. Please look down. Leo's perspective, the black SUV. Leo sat in the plush leather seat of the SUV, a book resting open on his lap, unread. Marcus, the family driver, tapped the steering wheel to the rhythm of a jazz station. Should be out any minute now, Leo. The bell rang 3 minutes ago. Leo didn't look up. His eyes were fixed on the digital display of his pink GPS watch. He hated the color. He hated the plastic feel of it. But he hadn't taken it off since the moment she snapped it onto his wrist. Luna was chaotic. She was loud, intrusive, and broke things. She dismantled the quiet, empty void he had spent 2 years carefully constructing around himself after the accident that took his first family. But she was also the only person who didn't look at him like he was made of cracked glass. She looked at him like he was a co-conspirator. The watch vibrated violently against his pulse. Leo froze. A little red icon flashed on the screen. Call from Psycho Bodyguard. He tapped the screen. He brought his wrist close to his ear. He expected to hear her obnoxious, bright voice complaining about homework. Instead, he heard the low hum of an engine, the rattle of metal, and a man's rough voice. Tie her ankles too. If she kicks me again, I'm knocking her out. Then, beneath the rumble, a faint, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Leo knew that rhythm. It was the sound Luna made when she knocked on his doorless frame every morning. It wasn't a distress signal she had learned. It was their signal. She was telling him she was there. A cold, terrifying clarity swept through the fog in Leo's brain. He didn't panic. The trauma that usually paralyzed him was entirely absent, replaced by a sudden, violent surge of adrenaline. Leo unbuckled his seatbelt. He climbed over the center console, practically crawling into the front seat. "Whoa, Leo, buddy. What you doing?" Marcus asked, startled. Leo shoved his wrist into Marcus's face. He pointed at the flashing red, moving rapidly away from the school on the digital map. Then, he pointed out the windshield, his finger trembling with absolute rage. He didn't make a sound, but his eyes screamed. Marcus looked at the watch, heard the muffled curses coming from the speaker, and looked back at the empty sidewalk where Luna should have been. The driver's face turned to stone. "Seatbelt. Now," Marcus ordered, throwing the heavy SUV into drive. As the tires smoked against the pavement, Marcus hit the Bluetooth dial on the dashboard. "Mr. Blackwood," Marcus said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "We have a code red. They took Luna." Luna's perspective. The abandoned mill. They dragged me into a place that smelled like wet sawdust and rust. An abandoned lumber mill, judging by the massive, silent machinery looming in the shadows. They tied me to a heavy steel pipe bolted to a concrete pillar. The thick-necked guy, Dave, was pacing nervously. The driver, Mr. Bully Dad, was typing furiously on a burner phone. "Okay," the driver muttered. Message sent to Blackwood. 2 million in untraceable crypto. If they call the cops, we dump her in the river. I spit out a mouthful of blood from where I'd bitten my own lip during the struggle. 2 million. I said loudly. Both men jumped. They hadn't bothered to gag me yet. "You're underselling me," I sneered, leaning my head back against the cold pipe. "My dad dropped 10 million on a library just to get your stupid kid expelled. 2 million is an insult." "I'm offended." "Shut up, you little brat," the driver snapped, stepping toward me. "I'm just saying, if you're gonna ruin your life and catch a federal kidnapping charge, aim higher. Besides, my brother is probably tracking you right now." "We checked your phone, kid." "You don't have one," Dave said, wiping sweat from his forehead. I just smiled. I didn't tell them about the watch currently hidden beneath the cuff of my sweater, still broadcasting a live audio feed and my exact coordinates. "Keep them talking," Mrs. Gable used to say, when dealing with the older, meaner kids. "If they're talking, they aren't hitting." "You know what my brother did when those kids picked on him?" I asked, my voice echoing in the empty mill. "Nothing. Because he knows he's rich and you're trash. But my dad? My dad is gonna skin you alive." The driver's face flushed with violent red heat. He crossed the room and backhanded me across the face. My head snapped to the side. A sharp ringing filled my ears, and the metallic taste of blood flooded my mouth. My vision blurred, but I forced myself to look back up at him, grinning with red-stained teeth. "My grandma hits harder than that," I whispered, "and she's a grenade." He raised his fist again, his eyes wide with unhinged fury. "I'm gonna kill you right now." Crash. The reinforced corrugated steel doors of the lumber mill didn't just open. They exploded inward. A massive black SUV rammed through the metal, the grille crumpled, headlights blinding in the dim warehouse. The vehicle fishtailed to a halt on the concrete floor, showering the men in glass and debris. Before the dust could even settle, the doors of the SUV flew open. 4 men in tactical black gear poured out, weapons raised. These weren't cops. This was Blackwood private security, and they moved with terrifying, silent precision. Dave screamed and threw his hands up, dropping to his knees instantly. But the driver, he panicked. He grabbed me by the collar of my sweater, hauling me up, and pressed a folding knife against my throat. "Back off," he shrieked, his voice cracking. "I'll cut her. I swear to God, I'll cut her." The security team froze. Laser sights danced across the man's chest and forehead, but nobody fired. The angle was too tight. He had me completely shielded. A second car screeched into the warehouse, a sleek silver sedan. My new parents threw open the doors. My mom let out a choked, horrifying sob when she saw the knife at my throat. My dad had to wrap his arms around her waist to stop her from running straight into the blade. "Let her go," my dad said, his voice echoing with a power I'd never heard before. It was the voice of a man who could destroy cities. "Let her go, and I will let you walk out of here. Hurt her, and there isn't a hole on this earth deep enough to hide you. I want my money. I want my life back," the man sobbed, the blade trembling against my skin. It stung. A warm trickle of blood slid down my collarbone.
I was scared now.
The bravado faded. My knees were shaking. I closed my eyes, preparing for the worst. Then, the rear door of the crushed SUV opened. Leo stepped out. He looked small amid the giant security guards and the massive warehouse. He was wearing his neat school uniform, his pink watch glowing in the dim light. "Leo, stay back," Marcus warned, trying to grab the boy's shoulder. Leo shoved the grown man's hand away with a strength that shocked everyone. He walked forward. He didn't look at the laser sights. He didn't look at the sobbing kidnapper.
He looked only at me.
His face was deadly pale, his jaw set so tight the muscles twitched. "Get the kid back," the kidnapper yelled, the knife pressing a millimeter deeper. I whimpered, unable to help it. Leo stopped 10 feet away. He stared at the man holding me. For 2 years, Leo's throat had been a locked vault. The doctors said it was psychogenic mutism. His brain had walled off his ability to speak to protect him from the trauma of his past. He had retreated into a fortress of silence where nothing could hurt him. But watching a blade press into the neck of the girl who had ripped his bedroom door off its hinges, the girl who had fought 6 older boys for him, the girl who put her cold feet on his to keep warm, the fortress didn't just crumble. It detonated. Leo's chest heaved. His hands balled into fists so tight his knuckles bled. His throat worked, swallowing violently as if trying to force a boulder up his windpipe. A harsh, jagged sound ripped from his chest. It sounded like tearing metal. "Ella." Everyone in the room froze. My parents stopped breathing. The kidnappers stared in sheer shock. Leo took another step forward, his eyes burning with a terrifying, primal intensity. The veins in his neck strained. "Let her go." It wasn't a whisper. It was a roar. It was a sound scraped from the bottom of his soul, rough and unused, and incredibly loud. The sheer shock of the mute boy screaming caused the kidnapper to flinch. His grip loosened for a fraction of a second. That was all I needed. I dropped my dead weight, slipping through his grasp. In a blur of motion, Marcus and 2 security guards tackled the man to the concrete. The knife clattered harmlessly away. I hit the ground, my lungs gasping for air. Before I could even try to sit up, a pair of arms wrapped around me. Leo dropped to his knees, pulling me against his chest. He was shaking violently, his breathing ragged. He buried his face in my shoulder, his hands clutching the fabric of my sweater as if he was afraid I would vanish into thin air. I leaned my head against his. My own tears, which I had held back through the kidnapping, the pain, and the terror, finally spilled over. "Hey," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I told you, I'm a hero. Heroes don't die." Leo pulled back just enough to look me in the eye. He reached up, his soft, trembling fingers gently wiping the blood from my neck. He opened his mouth. His voice was hoarse, raspy, and the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. "Mine," he whispered, glaring at the men pinning the kidnapper down, then looking back at me. "My sister." My dad was suddenly there, slicing the zip ties off my wrists. My mom fell to her knees beside us, pulling both Leo and me into a desperate, crushing hug. We were a tangled mess of tears, dirt, and blood on the floor of a ruined lumber mill. But in that moment, I knew something for absolute certain. I wasn't an orphan anymore. I was a Blackwood. Epilogue, 6 months later. "And so," I said, gesturing wildly with a half-eaten slice of pizza, the ghost realized that haunting the microwave was pointless, because ghosts don't eat Hot Pockets. The end. I took a massive bite of the pizza, kicking my legs back against the mattress. We were in Leo's room. The door was still off its hinges. My dad had offered to have it reinstalled a dozen times, but Leo had firmly shaken his head. He liked the open doorway now. He liked knowing when I was coming. Leo was sitting at his desk, working on a complex Lego architecture set. He paused, placing a tiny plastic brick with surgical precision. He turned in his chair and raised an eyebrow at me. "That," Leo said, his voice quiet but perfectly steady, "was the worst story you've ever told." I gasped in mock offense, clutching my chest. "Excuse me? The microwave apparition is a masterpiece of modern horror." Leo smirked. It was a small, subtle thing, but it lit up his whole face. It lacked narrative tension. "Oh, listen to Mr. Vocabulary," I teased, throwing a spare Lego block at his head. He caught it effortlessly midair, without even looking away from me. The transformation in Leo over the last 6 months had been nothing short of a miracle. He didn't become a chatterbox like me, he still preferred listening, and he still hated large crowds. But he spoke. Mostly to me, sometimes to our parents, and occasionally to a teacher. We were a team. A unit. The kids at school had quickly learned that making fun of the quiet kid meant dealing with a tiny, feral hurricane that followed him everywhere. And if I got too hot-headed, Leo was the calm hand on my shoulder, pulling me back before I got suspended again. My mom appeared in the open doorway, leaning against the frame with a soft, content smile. "Lights out in 10 minutes, you two," she said. "Luna, back to your room." "But Mom," I whined. My room is so far away. It's literally across the hall. That's practically another time zone. My mom rolled her eyes, chuckling as she walked down the hall. I sighed dramatically, brushing pizza crumbs off my pajamas. I slid off Leo's bed and stretched. All right, fine. I guess I'll go sleep in the Arctic tundra of my own bed. I walked toward the door, but stopped when I felt a gentle tug on the back of my shirt. I turned around. Leo was holding out a small, incredibly detailed Lego flower he had built using leftover pieces from his architecture set. For the Grenade girl, he said softly. I felt a massive, unstoppable smile spread across my face. I took the little plastic flower, holding it like it was made of solid gold. Thanks, Leo, I whispered. I stepped into the hallway, turning back to look at him one last time. He was already back to his building, his shoulders relaxed, the heavy burden of his past no longer crushing him down. I walked into my room, placed the Lego flower perfectly in the center of my nightstand, and climbed into bed. Mrs. Gable had been wrong. I wasn't just a regular disabled chatterbox, and Leo wasn't just a broken boy. We were broken pieces that, when mashed together, somehow made a perfect, indestructible whole. I reached over to my pink GPS watch resting on the nightstand. I tapped the screen, and through the wall, I heard the faint buzz of Leo's watch receiving the signal. A second later, my watch buzzed back.
Tap, tap, tap.
I smiled in the dark, pulled the covers up to my chin, and fell into the deepest, safest sleep of my life.